In our headlines on this Wednesday, July 8th, here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung addresses the NATO Summit's Defense Industry Forum, highlighting the importance of defense partnership to promote democracy and foster peace. Meanwhile, South Korea's current account surplus posts an all-time monthly high in May, standing at $38.6 billion, driven by stellar exports of chips. And in the international arena, less than a month since the signing of an MOU towards peace, the US and Iran are trading fire, with both sides accusing the other of violating the memorandum. Speaking at NATO's flagship forum on security in Türkiye, President Lee Jae-myung called for deepening defense collaboration with the Western alliance amid the shared interest in democracy, peace and freedom. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin files this report from the ground.
Korea is a trusted partner built on shared values and proven capabilities. That was President Lee Jae-myung's message as he made his NATO summit debut on Tuesday.
신뢰할 수 있는 파트너인 대한민국의 안정적인 생산 역량과 검증된 기술력이 나토의 오랜 노하우와 합쳐진다면 양쪽의 안보 역량은 지금보다 훨씬 강력해질 것이 분명합니다.
Speaking at the summit's flagship defense industry forum, Lee said Korea and NATO share the painful memory of war and a common commitment to defending democracy, freedom, and peace. To further strengthen those ties, the president proposed upgrading defense industry cooperation in research and development.
단순히 무기 체계를 거래하는 현재 방산 협력을 넘어 무기 체계를 함께 연구하고 함께 생산하며 함께 운용하는 한 나토 방위 산업 파트너십 2.0으로 격상해 나가기를 제안합니다.
The Blue House says this would improve interoperability, reduce maintenance costs, and allow both sides to jointly upgrade defense systems. Korea and NATO also announced the launch of negotiations on a framework procurement agreement following talks between President Lee and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
Once the agreement is concluded, Korean companies will have an institutional foundation to participate in NATO's joint procurement market, estimated at around 15 trillion won, roughly $9.9 billion.
In a separate meeting on the same day, NATO and its four Indo-Pacific partners, Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, agreed that cooperation among like-minded partners is becoming increasingly important. The group session was first introduced at last year's NATO summit in The Hague. The Blue House says President Lee's NATO trip is aimed at broadening Korea's diplomatic horizon, with a particular focus on expanding defense cooperation with the alliance, whose members account for more than half of global defense spending. He is expected to continue that effort on Wednesday through bilateral meetings with war leaders. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News, Ankara.
Also in Turkey, US President Donald Trump chose to use the NATO platform to air his grievances with his Western counterparts for failing to support his military campaign against Iran and to reignite calls for US control over Greenland. Our Lee Seung-jae covers his words.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Tuesday that he may not have attended the NATO summit in Türkiye if it not had been hosted by Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan. Speaking in Ankara, Trump criticized several NATO allies, accusing them of failing to support the United States during its conflict with Iran.
But we weren't treated well because we did something in Iran. We don't need anybody's help. I didn't even want their help. But before I asked, they said they wouldn't be there.
Trump said countries including Italy, France, and Germany made clear they would not back the U.S. in the conflict, arguing that Washington has consistently supported its allies while receiving little in return. He added that the United States did not need their help, but questioned why it should continue spending heavily on the alliance if its partners were unwilling to stand with it. European leaders have said they do not want to be drawn into the conflict with Iran, noting they were not consulted before the military operation. However, they have expressed a willingness to help safeguard shipping through the Strait of Hormuz following the fighting. Trump also reignited tensions within the alliance by repeating that Greenland should be under U.S. control rather than remain part of the Kingdom of Denmark.
Greenland doesn't help Denmark. Denmark doesn't spend money to really help Greenland, but it's an important part for the United States. And it's surrounded by China ships and Russian ships. That should be controlled by the United States, not by Denmark.
The issue has long strained relations between Washington and Copenhagen, both founding members of NATO. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen rejected Trump's remarks, saying she expects allies to respect Denmark's sovereignty and stressing that Greenland is not for sale. She added that there were no plans for NATO leaders to discuss Greenland or broader Arctic issues during the summit. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, on the margins of the NATO meeting in Turkey, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun sat down with his US and Japanese counterparts to seal a strategic clean energy partnership. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young has details.
Korea, the United States and Japan agreed to speed up the deployment of small modular reactors overseas, signing a new memorandum of cooperation on the sidelines of the NATO summit in Ankara on Tuesday. According to Seoul's Foreign Ministry, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Japanese Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi signed the agreement during their first trilateral foreign ministers meeting of the year. The framework will begin in the Indo-Pacific before expanding cooperation to other partner countries. It aims to bring together the complementary strengths of the three countries' civil nuclear industries, supporting joint business consortiums, project financing, and capacity building in recipient countries. It also covers cooperation on technology, fuel, equipment, and services. SMRs are an advanced class of nuclear fission reactors that produce up to 300 megawatts of electric power. The US State Department said the agreement advances mutual security interests and paves the way for partner countries to meet their energy security needs. On other matters, the three ministers reaffirmed that economic security remains a key pillar of cooperation, agreeing to deepen practical work in nuclear energy, artificial intelligence, and quantum technology. They also agreed to strengthen supply chain resilience and coordinate responses to economic coercion. On North Korea, the ministers shared their assessment of the situation on the Korean peninsula and agreed to maintain close policy coordination, including responses to Pyongyang's illicit cyber activities. They reaffirmed the principle of denuclearizing the Korean peninsula, while agreeing to continue efforts to maintain peace and stability through dialogue and diplomacy. Beyond the peninsula, the three sides agreed to seek more concrete and visible cooperation on transnational crime, disaster relief, humanitarian assistance, and the Arctic. They also exchanged views on regional and global developments, including Northeast Asia and the Middle East. The meeting comes as Washington remains heavily focused on the Middle East, including tensions involving Iran, and after recent trade frictions with key partners. Foreign Minister Cho stressed that in the face of a wide range of global challenges, cooperation among trusted allies has become more important than ever, and called for further strengthening of three-way ties to promote shared security and prosperity. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
In other news now, South Korea's current account remained in the black in the month of May with a record-breaking surplus driven by stellar chip exports. Our Kim Jun-ong has the latest numbers.
Korea posted a record current account surplus in May, supported by robust semiconductor exports. The Bank of Korea said Wednesday that the country's current account surplus reached $38.61 billion in May. The figure marked the largest monthly surplus on record, up by more than $10 billion from the previous month. This brought the January to May surplus to more than 4 times the level recorded in the same period last year. The country has now recorded current account surpluses for 37 consecutive months. Strong exports fueled the surplus, as overall exports rose 62.9% on year. Semiconductors remained the key driver, with exports rising 167% to $37.29 billion, while exports of computer peripherals, including SSDs, soared nearly 250%. Exports to China saw the sharpest increase, with shipments to most other major markets also rising. Shipments to the Middle East, however, moved lower. Imports rose 22.2% from a year earlier, driven mainly by higher raw material purchases amid the Middle East conflict. But that was offset by even faster export growth. Wednesday's result follows months of strong trade surpluses.
Given the exceptionally large trade surplus in May, this strong current account result was largely expected. And since June's trade surplus was even bigger, the next current account report is also likely to remain strong.
A Bank of Korea official added that June's current account surplus is expected to reach around $40 billion, with this year's total likely to surpass earlier projections. Meanwhile, net financial assets saw their second largest increase on record. Foreign investors posted a record net sell-off in Korean equities, largely due to profit-taking after the recent market rally. Kim Jun-ong, Arirang News.
And as the global AI boom fuels soaring demand for advanced memory chips, South Korean tech giants are racing to expand their production base here at home. Our Park Chun-han was on site.
In Yongin, Gyeonggi-do Province, workers are busy erecting the steel pillars that will soon anchor the world's largest semiconductor megacluster. Right here on this ground, SK hynix is building its next-generation semiconductor cluster. The company will spend 600 trillion won, or roughly $390 billion to complete the project as early as 2033. The site will soon house 4 new fabrication plants to meet the booming demand for AI memory chips. Samsung Electronics is also stepping up its game in Yongin to fund future tech infrastructure. Though the designated site is currently empty, the area will soon transform into Samsung's mega semiconductor complex. The reason behind this aggressive bet is AI demand. The global AI race is moving faster than ever, and at the heart of this is a surging demand for high-performance memory semiconductors used for AI data centers. While explosive AI investments by global tech giants have brought massive capital into Korea's top 2 chip makers, a shortage of AI memory chips has raised concerns across the tech industry. Soaring prices have delivered record profits for chip makers in the short term, but an extended supply bottleneck could force tech giants to seek alternatives to expensive memory, potentially reshaping the market demands. To prevent supply bottlenecks and secure long-term market leadership, Samsung and SK hynix have significantly accelerated plans to complete their semiconductor clusters, which were originally slated for the 2040s. Plans are also underway to establish a second semiconductor hub in the country's southwest. For now, however, the Yongin clusters remain the centerpiece of the projects. Once completed, they could serve as Korea's core AI infrastructure, helping power the global AI era. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
The South Korean economy remains on track, backed by the semiconductor and service industries. In its July report released on this Wednesday, the Korea Development Institute made note of exports in June soaring over 70% on year in response to AI-related demand. By item, daily chip and computer exports surged almost 180% and 282% respectively. At the same time, steady advancements in financial and professional services boosted overall service production by 4.9% in May. The local bourse, meanwhile, surrendered more ground on this Wednesday as institutional and individual investors engaged in a selling spree. The rampant sell-off triggered a sell-side sidecar for the benchmark KOSPI in the afternoon, followed by a similar call for the tech-heavy KOSDAQ minutes later. At closing bell, the KOSPI was down over 5% to end trade at roughly 7,247. Similarly, the KOSDAQ lost more than 5% to close trade at 785. Less than 1 month since the signing of an MOU towards peace, the U.S. and Iran are trading fire, with both sides accusing the other of violating the memorandum. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
Iran has launched immediate retaliatory strikes against United States military bases in Bahrain and Kuwait, sharply escalating tensions in the Middle East. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced on Wednesday local time that its naval and aerospace forces fired missiles and drones at 85 U.S. military facilities across the two nations. The IRGC also claims to have shot down an American MQ-9 drone, categorizing the offensive as an initial response. Authorities in Bahrain and Kuwait activated air defense systems early Wednesday to intercept the incoming projectiles. Bahrain issued air raid sirens and urged residents to take immediate shelter as multiple explosions were reported. The Iranian bombardment came hours after U.S. Central Command struck more than 80 targets inside Iran, hitting air defense networks, coastal radar systems, and anti-ship missile capabilities. Simultaneously, the U.S. Treasury revoked a 60-day sanctions waiver that had temporarily exempted Iranian crude oil and petrochemical exports under the fragile ceasefire deal. CENTCOM stated the actions impose heavy costs for what it termed unwarranted maritime aggression. The U.S. offensive was triggered by overnight projectile attacks on 3 commercial vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Among the targets was Saudi-flagged crude oil tanker and a Qatari liquefied natural gas carrier. The Qatari ship took a direct hit to its port side, disabling its engines and sparking an engine room fire. Qatar has formally protested the maritime attack, summoning Iran's deputy ambassador in Doha to condemn the incident as a direct threat to global energy security. Iran's foreign ministry rejected the allegations and fiercely condemned Washington's sanctions move. Tehran claims the U.S. revocation violates Article 10 of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding less than 20 days after it was signed. While the U.S. cites a breach of the ceasefire, Tehran counter-accuses Washington of bad faith, declaring it will take all necessary measures to protect its national security and maintain its own strict management over the Strait of Hormuz. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, major South Korean shipbuilders have reportedly submitted to the U.S. information regarding their capabilities to build naval vessels, raising prospects of a potential partnership. Our Lee Ju-yeon explains.
The United States has reportedly requested information to Korean shipbuilders to assess their naval vessel construction and design capabilities. According to defense industry sources on Wednesday, the U.S. Department of Defense and the Navy recently issued requests for information to Korean shipbuilders, covering vessels such as destroyers and fleet replenishment ships. An RFI is a formal process used by the government to gather market data, including pricing, delivery timelines, and other information needed for project planning. In response, Korea's 2 major naval shipbuilders, HD Hyundai Heavy Industries and Hanwha Ocean, reportedly submitted details of their combat ship design and construction capabilities to the Pentagon last month. Samsung Heavy Industries has also entered the race, joining the 2 frontrunners for the U.S. Navy medium-sized naval tanker project. The move aligns with President Trump's push to revive the U.S. shipbuilding industry through the MASCA initiative, short for Make American Shipbuilding Great Again, as well as his continued interest in Korean shipbuilding.
We are thinking about contracting some ships. They build them very well in South Korea. They're also thinking about coming to our country with some shipyards to start us on the process of building ships.
This marks the first time the U.S. has formally inquired about Korean shipbuilders' naval capabilities through an RFI. According to a Kotra report released last year, the U.S. needs 364 new ships by 2054 to strengthen its naval power, averaging around 12 ships per year. The RFI process is drawing sharp attention after President Trump directly asked Korean President Lee Jae-myung at last month's G7 summit whether Korea could quickly build 10 U.S. warships.
미국 군함 열척을 빠르게 건조해 줄 수 있겠느냐 이런 의사를 저한테 물어봤습니다. 물론 거기에 대해서 당연히 가능하고 최선을 다하겠다고 답해 드렸습니다.
This strongly suggests the U.S. is moving beyond high-level presidential messaging and has officially begun concrete working-level reviews through its Department of Defense and Navy. The move follows an early bilateral agreement to set aside $150 billion from Korea's $350 billion U.S. investment package for shipbuilding cooperation. Lee Ju-yeon, Arirang News.
And a Buddhist temple here in the capital city recently played host to migrant workers from Laos, hoping to offer them a sense of home away from home. Our Park Chae-ryang files this report.
Agricultural workers from Laos sit with their hands neatly folded, bow in prayer and listen attentively as a Buddhist monk shares teachings of the Dharma. Quiet and reserved at first, many appear calm as they encounter a familiar faith in a different cultural setting. The migrants have been invited to a temple in Seoul to experience Korean Buddhist culture. The group then took part in a lotus lantern making session. Before the activity began, an instructor explained that although the lotus flower blooms from muddy waters, it remains pure, making it a powerful symbol in Buddhism.
I've always liked lotus flowers, but making one myself felt special. After spending most of my time working in Korea, joining a Buddhist event like this reminded me of home and helped me feel a little more connected to Korea.
As an interpreter guides them through each step, they then carefully glue together paper petals and leaves before placing a small light inside, gradually bringing their lotus lanterns to life.
I've taken part in many Buddhist events in Laos, but this is the first time I ever made a lotus lantern like this in Korea. I'm really happy to be here and take part in this event with my friends.
Then, a Korean percussion performance began. The participants clapped, cheered, and filmed a Nanta-style drum and samulnori performances on their phones. They were then invited to try the instruments themselves, quickly becoming immersed in the rhythms as performers and spectators came together as one. Later, the participants sat down for tea and traditional refreshments prepared by the organizers. They carefully poured and shared tea, experiencing another aspect of Korean temple culture. For migrants who may still miss home, the event offered a chance to better understand Korea through a familiar faith. Through a shared Buddhist tradition, this little culture exchange offers a small but meaningful step toward bringing migrants and local communities closer together. Park Chae-ryung, Arirang News.
Seoul has only been seeing light rain on and off today, but it's a different story farther south. Torrential rain has been pounding parts of the Chungcheongdo and Jeollabuk-do provinces. And by tomorrow, these areas could pick up more than 200 millimeters of rain, while the central regions and Gyeongsang-Buk-do province could see more than 150 millimeters of rain. Heavy rain advisories are also in effect across parts of the central regions and the Jeollado provinces. The rain has taken the edge off the heat in some places, but heat advisories remained in effect across much of the Gyeongsang-do provinces. Landslide alerts are also in place across most of the country, so if you're near hillsides or mountain trails, it's best to stay away until the weather settles down. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 24 degrees Celsius, Daegu 25, Busan 23 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 27 degrees, Chuncheon 26, Daegu 33 degrees. Then once the rain moves out, the steamy summer heat will build quickly again toward the end of the week. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us.